right, and Craig's recording. And we'll go ahead and get started. Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome again to Nerd to the Third Power, your one-stop shop for all things nerdy and awesome. I'm your host and master of ceremonies, Dr. Gonzo. Kat is running a bit late. She's stuck in that rush hour traffic, so she'll be here soon. But Skyblaze, you're here, and you look like living death.
That could be because me and one other person at work have been doing the work of 4 people.
Oh boy, yeah, that'll do it.
What fun that has been.
So I can only assume that you are generously caffeinated at the moment.
Oh yes, Rockstar X-Durance all the way.
Speaking of trashy foods.
Absolutely.
And so, yes, we got a fun show for you guys tonight. We're going to be discussing expanded narratives when a shorter story is padded out for a television series or a film. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And we've also got a neat little bonus for those of you who only listen to us on MP3 downloads, never check out our YouTube channel. You have a reason to do so now. We've got a nice little surprise video that I just put up today as we record this episode. A few weeks ago, I subscribed for a Loot Crate-style service called RetroGameTreasure.com, which sends you a loot crate every month with an assortment of random retro video games that they promise will come out to at least $35 in value. So I signed up. I told them what games I already had, what systems I was collecting for, and they sent me my first crate this week. So yeah, if you want to go ahead and check out that video, I did my first unboxing video. I want to apologize in advance for the shitty focus. I had to shoot it on my cell phone camera because my camcorder is packed up, but I will have that fixed by the next time I get one of those crates. So yeah, go check that out. And anyway, so yeah, we're going to go ahead and jump right into it. We're going to start by following up with our random topic of the week from last week, which was trash foods that we just can't stay away from. I mentioned that I will absolutely annihilate a thing of McDonald's fries, and Skyblaze mentioned that her drug of choice is cheap microwave popcorn. So we got some responses here from the email, from the comments, so we're going to go ahead and read a few of them off. Don is first up, and he says that he's addicted to orange circus peanuts. Oh, God.
I'm very sorry. Are you okay?
Do you have those over there in the UK?
Not very much. I've mostly seen them when I've been abroad, but they taste wild.
I imagine not, because your health and safety regulations in regards to foodstuffs tends to be much more strict than ours over here in the US. Okay. The doctor checks in. Very nice to have his patronage. He calls you out, Skyblaze. He says, I see your popcorn and raise you a binge on a 2-liter tub of mint chocolate ice cream from Morrison's. Wait, Morrison's? Is that he's talking about that cafeteria-style restaurant chain that was around like 20 years ago? They're still around?
No. Morrison's is a supermarket that's based in the UK, mostly based in the north of the UK. Oh,
okay. All right. Okay. Neat Otaku writes in, there used to be an energy drink called Full Throttle Blue, which is delicious, but every time I drank it, I could feel my kidneys crying. I bet you can sympathize with that at this current moment.
Yeah, drinking Rockstar X-Durance for most of the afternoon to try and keep myself awake. On the other hand, it is supposed to be very good if you get tension headaches a lot, so I don't know what's going on there.
Okay. Kara writes in, when I was pregnant with my daughter, I could not stop eating gummy bears. Let's just say I knew they were horrible for me, but I did not know how bad they would be for my bathroom. Ooh, yeah, okay. Ooh.
Grim.
Yeah, very grim. Yeah, okay. Cool. Okay, and Benny, I don't know how you haven't had a coronary yet. He writes, when I was in my first year of college, I worked for 7-Eleven and would eat 3 to 5 Big Bite hot dogs a day. To make it worse, I also added cheese and chili from the nacho topping dispenser. Oh, God, just ugh. Mm.
So, mostly eating plastic?
Badly cooked plastic at that.
Right.
And Luke writes in, when KFC had the double down sandwich, I could not get enough of them, even though I could hear my heart screaming every time I ate one. Oh God, did you get this over there in the UK?
Very briefly we did, yeah.
Okay, for those of you who don't know what the double down is, it is, if I remember correctly, it was something the KFC only had for like a limited time, and they bring it back every now and then, like McDonald's does with the McRib. But it's basically, if I remember this correctly, it's a grilled chicken breast with cheese, that's sandwiched between two fried chicken breasts. And
that sounds about right.
Yeah, and I just, a couple years ago when KFC had it, I just tried one out of sheer morbid curiosity. And I only got 2 bites in before I had to wing it like a Frisbee out of my car window because it was just so fucking disgusting. So, oh, God, Luke, see a cardiologist, man. And but as far as trashy foods, I think Beth wins in with her write-in. She says, "My brother is addicted to Valentine's candy hearts. Every February, he buys hundreds of dollars worth, and they last him all year. So he is just buying up all these candy hearts every Valentine's Day, and he's just chipping away at them throughout the entire year. Oh God."
By candy hearts, what do you mean? Like the sugar ones, or the chocolate, or what?
I presume that she means the sugar, the ones that are like one step away from a Necco wafer, the real chalky ones.
Oh, those things, like love hearts. I think.
Yeah,
yeah.
That have the little messages on them.
Yeah, love hearts over here.
Okay, yeah, and like, oh God, your brother could probably save some money by just going to a school supply store and buying chalk. Oh God. Ooh. So yeah, those are our those are the write-ins we got for last week's random topic of the week. So yeah, like I said, send your responses in every time we do a random topic. We love read them on the air, and we'll have a new topic next week. The way we do this is we come up with a topic, we discuss it on our side, and then we do the follow-up next week where we read your responses. So, yeah, send your responses in when we do a topic to drgonzo@nerdtothethirdpower.com. Okay, and with that, we're going to jump right into Ask a Geek, and we got some questions here. First one here is from Becky, and so Skyblaze, are you sending us questions to pad our inbox?
Very funny.
But anyway, she asked a question of all of us, and that is, based on the trailers that have been released, what do you think of the Venom movie? So, Skyblaze, have you seen the new Venom trailer that got put out?
I've seen stills from it that somebody posted on Twitter, and was still like, it's better than the first trailer they released, but it's still...
Well, they actually showed Venom this time.
Yeah, it's like, I am marginally more interested, but only marginally, considering this is still going to be a Venom movie that somehow doesn't have Spider-Man in. I have many questions.
I'm going to say I'm willing to give the money a fair shake based on what I saw in the trailer. I really loved the transformation sequence at the end. I thought that was really cool. It's definitely miles above what they did for Venom in Spider-Man 3.
That is not a high bar to clear, to be fair.
No, it isn't. Topher Grace, why? So I'm willing to. I gave the trailer points for that, and enough to give it a fair shake. I then had to dock a few points because that is not how symbiote is pronounced.
I've seen this argument all over the place.
It's not how that's pronounced. It's no, just no. As an aspiring writer and lover of words, I had a little eye twitch at that moment. It's like, that's not how that's pronounced. Fix that shit.
How was it pronounced, out of curiosity?
Not like that. I've always said symbiote, but the proper, I believe the proper word is actually symbiont with an N at the end before the T. But the debates on how it's actually supposed to be and how symbiote is pronounced have raged for many years. It's kind of like tomato and tomato, you know.
I've heard it pronounced both symbiote and symbiote.
Yeah, that's how I pronounce it, symbiote. Not with as much emphasis on the B as we're saying here, but that's just for differentiating.
Yes.
But like, you know, I think what really made it worse was how they spaced out the syllables, like they were making up the word. We call them symbiotes. And I'm like, no, those aren't two words. There's no hyphen in there. That's one word.
Unless they're trying to do some sort of weird trademarky bullshit.
Which would not surprise me.
You know, the poor literacy of cool thing from the 1990s.
Yep. And let's see, Andrew here, he has a question. He's asking me, do I think that some of the Pokemon YouTubers are getting a bit squirrely? And he's asking us in regards to rumors about the next game. And I can say that, yeah, if they're getting squirrely, they have reason to be. I'm willing to bet serious money that we're going to hear. We're going to get the announcement. Oh, hey, Cat's joined in.
A wild cat appears.
Oh, yes. But with headphones this time.
Great.
Hey, so how you been, Cat?
Oh, let's not talk about it.
All right. Okay. Well, we're here doing Ask a Geek questions. We've already followed up on the random topic of the week last week, which was trashy foods we can't stay away from. I mentioned last week that I will destroy a thing of McDonald's fries. Skyblaze is addicted to cheap microwave popcorn, and I think you've actually expressed a certain fondness for Checkers in the past.
Oh, well, I mean, not Checkers more so much than any other fast food. I love fast food a lot. I do love Checkers, which in the Midwest is called Rallies, but it's the same thing. Tater tots, I'll eat the shit out of tater tots. I go to Sonic all the time because they have them here in the Midwest. Chick-fil-A.
Absolutely none of what you said makes any sense to me.
Chick-fil-A waffle fries are amazing. Trash food. I eat a lot of trash food, especially lately. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, Cat is a connoisseur of trash foods.
I am. It's awful.
Okay. All right. Well, anyway, cycling back to Ask a Geek, we're going back to Andrew's question of do I think the Pokemon YouTubers are getting a bit squirrely in regards to rumors of a new game? I think they have reason to be, because if you look at the release cycle for Pokemon, we've been getting a new game just about every year. And Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon were pretty much Sun and Moon with a fresh coat of paint. And if you look back, the last time they did something like that, way back with Black 2 and White 2, which are basically black and white, just with some extra bells and whistles, they were doing that. They did that before there was a major generational shift. In that case, it was from the DS to the 3DS. And Nintendo has already gone on record as saying that the next Pokemon game is going to be on the Switch. And I am convinced that the reason why they did Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon is because they've been working behind the scenes on Pokemon Switch, which I am pretty convinced that we are going to see an announcement for at E3 this year. So yeah, I'm putting $2 on SunUp. We're going to see Pokemon at E3 this year. So if the Pokemon YouTubers are getting squirrely, they've got reason to be, I think. Okay, and we're going to cycle back to Becky's question for you, Kat, which was, being Skyblaze has already answered that, but Becky's question was, based on the trailers that have been released, what do you think of the Venom movie?
I'm sorry, I haven't gotten to watch a trailer or a movie or do anything of any kind of personal entertainment for a couple of weeks now, so I actually haven't watched it yet. Sorry. Okay. I'm in countdown for my convention, so I go to work and then I come home and then I work on convention stuff and then I go to bed.
Okay, all right.
This sounds familiar.
I was gonna watch it on my lunch break, and then that didn't happen.
Okay, all right. So we'll get Kat's answer when she returns from con, Becky. Okay, but on a similar note, Paul's got a question for you, and this is one that I'm surprised we haven't answered yet, given how big a fuss it was a few months ago when it first came out. But it's a question for you, Kat. It's a two-parter. First question is, what do you think of the prospect of the Battle Angel Alita movie? And secondary question, are you a fan of the original manga and anime?
I'm not a fan of the original, but I have been kind of bitchy about the Battle Angel movie, if only because James Cameron was sitting on that license for a long time, and he had pretty much said that he wasn't going to make Battle Angel Alita until after like 2 more Avatar movies. And then at some point in time, he must have given up on that being a timely thing and just said, somebody else make it, and just put my name on it. So I think he's like a producer, but he's not the director, like what that was the original intention. So I'm happy that it's getting made, that there's a trailer out there and everything. I have no emotional attachment to it except my bitterness that the license was sat on for so long, because that's a thing that's happened, a bit in America. Some company will buy up a license and then just never release a live-action movie, which I'm okay with because I don't really like any of these live-action movies. But there are people who do, people who are huge fans. I know people who are big Battle Angel fans, who have been looking forward to this movie for quite some time. And so I'm excited for other people who will get to watch this film. It looks crazy. The big thing with Alita's her appearance, the uncanny valley that her character,
those eyes.
Oh my god, it is uncanny valley. I don't understand the need for it, but it is going to be unique. I think it's going to take a lot of risks. I think it has a better chance of succeeding than a lot of other films that come from anime in the past, just because there's such a big name attached to it. But it feels like it has kind of gone underground again and nobody's talking about it. So I don't know if I'll go see it, because again, I've never really liked any of these live action films based on anime or manga, but I'm willing to give it a shot. Like I might Redbox it or something to see, just because the visuals I think are going to be outstanding.
Okay. And the last question before we move on to our discussion topic, this is from Dan, and it is for me. And he asks, what is the most expensive retro game I've ever seen? Okay, so now I guess is he asking that I know of that's been sold, or the one that I've actually laid eyes on? Okay, I'll tell you what, I'll go ahead and meet him in the middle on that one. Okay, so you guys remember Tom, right? He used to be our tech guy, used to do editing for us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, he hit me up about a month or so ago. He went into a local Goodwill, and he found this dinky little Game Boy game called Spud's Adventure in box that they were selling for like 50 cents. I think Kat's already been told this story. She knows where this is going. And you know, he hit me up and was like, "Hey, look what I found." And I just looked at it, was like Spud's Adventure, and was like, "Oh, well, that's great. What is it? Like, why should I care? This is like a dumb little game." And he came back with like, this is one of the top 10 rarest Game Boy games in existence, and I found it complete in box. And I'm thinking like, okay, you know, rare game. He probably make maybe like $300-400. Too long, didn't read. He sold it to a private collector for $1,600.
What the fuck? What? That's incredible.
Yeah, and I was like. And he told me that, and I was like, "You realize I have to kill you now, right? You've painted a target on your back.
I must kill you and take your powers."
But yeah, so yeah, that's the most expensive game that I have ever had a tangential connection to that I have seen sold. Now I have seen games go for much more. Like I know of games that will sell for much more. Like the sculptor's cut of Clay Fighter for the Nintendo 64, a complete in-box in-box copy of that'll break $2,000 easily. And then of course, you know, you have the ones that everybody knows of, the Field Sports for the NES and the Nintendo World Championship cartridges that, you know, everybody says they've seen, but no one can ever produce evidence of, you know, because I think all of those are accounted for. But Tom's tech guy Tom selling Spud's Adventure for $1,600. That's the closest I've ever gotten to you know, a rare game of that much value. So let's just say that when I go retro game hunting, I'll be stopping in Goodwills from now on. So because that was
Who knew?
Well, apparently Tom did.
Yeah, apparently Tom did.
So anyway, that's all the Ask Geek questions that we have for this week. Thank you as always for sending them to us. You can send us your questions to drgonzo@nerdtothethirdpower.com, or you can leave them in the comments below the YouTube feed. We do occasionally troll through the YouTube for questions. So yeah, get your questions in, and you might just get it read on the air. And so with that, we are going to turn our eye, like the baleful eye of Sauron, to our discussion topic, which is decompressed narratives. Now, we love to see our favorite books, games, what have you, adapted for television or film, because it's one extra way that we can consume the media that we want, because we as fans are inherently greedy that way. But there are occasionally times where the source material isn't really big enough or long enough to really satisfy the needs of the medium that it's being adapted to. And then there are times where people just get greedy and just like, okay, let's see if we can stretch this narrative out for as long as we possibly can. And we've seen this in films, we've seen this in television, we've seen this certainly in anime. I'm sure Kat will expound at length on Namek and Soul Society. But yeah, so we're going to discuss some times that that this has happened that maybe it didn't really work, or times that it's been to the work's benefit. And there's actually a rather interesting reason that we're discussing this. And Kat and Skyblaze, I think you're the one that brought this up, and you actually brought up something rather interesting that I hadn't heard of yet. So why don't you tell us what brought this idea to your mind?
It was the mention of turning Lord of the Rings into a TV series.
Oh god, that's right.
And yeah, okay, there's a lot of story in Lord of the Rings, but is it enough to support a weekly TV series?
Yeah, that's... Bearing in mind that Lord of the Rings is like my favorite book ever, it's something that I reread religiously every year. I love it. I love the story, but, you know, one of the things that I find very hard to argue when people bring it up as a criticism is there's an awful lot of nothing happening in that book. There are long stretches of narrative where it's basically long exposition or people just standing around talking or, you know, hiking through the woods. And a lot of that has to do with how Tolkien wrote the stories and the narrative structure. But, you know, and of course we had Peter Jackson adapt the books to movies brilliantly in his Lord of the Rings trilogy. But I really don't see it working as a television series unless they draw from the background material in like the appendices or something.
Well, I don't think it was going to be a Lord of the Rings TV series. I think that's just people were calling it Lord of the Rings because it's the most commonly known title out there. But I don't know what it was going to be about other than it was going to probably have to come from the Silmarillion or the Lost Tales. But I don't think it was going to be Lord of the Rings specifically, or at least that's the impression I was under.
They've been very vague about it, which worries me slightly. Because the thing about stories is that in order to be successful, they have to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. If you're just kind of going, oh, we're just going to grab stuff from wherever, then you don't have a beginning, a middle, and an end, do you? You just have a bunch of stuff.
Right.
This is where you run into problems.
To me, that is the hardest part of doing anything with Lord of the Rings, is that Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit were basically the only two self-contained stories that came out of Middle-earth. And everything else is so interconnected with the whole history of Middle-earth. Like, you can't talk about Beren and Luthien without talking about a bunch of other stuff. You can't talk about... Like, I would love to see a story about Galadriel, but you can't talk about Galadriel without going into Feanor. And you can't talk about Feanor without going into the Silmarils. And you can't go into the Silmarils without talking about Morgoth. And so on and so forth, all the way back through history. And then
there's the entire separate story about what in the name of hell is going on with the dwarves, who have an entirely separate origin story and possibly a different role in society, because as far as the elves are concerned, the dwarves shouldn't be there at all, which is why they hate them so much.
Yeah.
So it's and a lot of it contradicts itself as well, because Professor Tolkien was still writing this stuff when he died, was still in the editing process for things like the extended history of Middle-earth and Lost Tales and so on, or what became Lost Tales. And the history of Middle-earth. So a lot of stuff, like even people who've got like the same names, and it's like, are these the same guy, or is this a different guy and he was going to rename him later? We don't know.
Let's make it up. There's two Glorfindels. We'll just get over it.
He came back from the dead because shut up, that's why.
And it also doesn't help, especially if we're talking about the Silmarillion, that first off, there's no real narrative structure because the Silmarillion was written as a history, but what story is in the Silmarillion tends to have some very significant time skips. I think the opening chapter starts with the creation of the world, and then the next time that we settle down at a point in history, some like 3,000 years have passed. So
it's like a really long thought stream of history. It's like, here's what happened, and this is what followed, and this is what followed, and this is what followed, and it doesn't really stop. It just keeps going and going, and yeah, there are giant time skips in there.
What might work better is if they just kind of say, this is the Middle-earth anthology show, and they just kind of go, the only kind of structure is, at the start they're doing stuff from very early history, at the end they're doing stuff from, like, you know, right at the end of the War of the Ring, or afterwards. And just kind of pick significant moments and do episodes about Glorfindel and the fight with the Balrog, or whatever. There's a whole bunch of stuff, or like Feanor and the War for the Silmarils and stuff like this, and just pick significant moments. And this way, you can shine a light on those areas which might be lesser known. And yeah, if you really want fanboys, you can do Tom fucking Bombadil if you absolutely fucking insist.
Yes.
No, it's boring and pointless.
I love it.
Speak for yourself. I myself
stops dead. Whatever plot narrative and forward motion it has at that point, which isn't a great deal, just slows to a complete fucking halt for that entire chapter. And like, what the hell am I reading?
There's more to Tom Bombadil than just that one chapter, and I would love to see more of his whimsical adventures in the forest. Mm-hmm. But while we're discussing stories being stretched out, I have to bring this up, otherwise my head will explode, and that's the Hobbit movies. Now, I've said before on the show that for the first two films, the expanded editions on the Blu-ray and DVD make the movies much more enjoyable because they add more context from the books, so you have a much more cohesive narrative. Then you get to the third movie and the exact opposite occurs. I was like, this didn't even need to be a full theatrical film. This could have just been, you know, another hour or so to the second film. Because for those who haven't read the original Hobbit novel, the Battle of
it was going to be two films originally anyway.
Yeah. For those who haven't read The Hobbit, the original book, the Battle of Five Armies in the book is covered in about a paragraph. And Bilbo spends the whole of the battle knocked out. He's unconscious. We don't actually see the Battle of the Five Armies. So that whole third movie was basically, they tried to stretch one paragraph of narrative into a 2.5 hour film. So, you know, I got the extended trilogy set, and like, the first extended version was great, the second extended version was great, third extended version, oh my god, just end. Because it's just one long action sequence. I'm like, I have stopped caring what happens to any of these people.
To be fair to the films, you get what you pay for. Like, the movie was called The Battle of Five Armies, was it not?
Yeah.
So you got it. Like, you knew what you were getting into.
Well, yeah, but like I'm kind of convinced. I'm halfway convinced that stretching out the Battle of the Five Armies to an entire film was halfway a greedy corporate cash grab, and halfway a bet, but with the executives to see if they could stretch a paragraph of narrative into a 2.5 hour film.
Yeah, this was definitely a series of films that should have staged 2 films instead of 3, and there were plenty of good places to have cut it, where they could have made it 2 films and it would have been fine. There's a lot of stuff that just didn't belong because it didn't contribute to the overall story. It was kind of stupid because they spent so much of it setting up Lord of the Rings, but it didn't need to be set up because it already happened. Like, we've already seen these films. We don't need to have them set up for us. We know what's going to happen.
I quite like the fact that a lot of the dwarves were given more of a personality and more depth, and I quite liked the extended stuff regarding Gandalf and Galadriel. That was great.
And Radagast the Brown, because Sylvester McCoy is just a treasure.
Yes, because Sylvester McCoy turns up and wins. With bird poo on his head. But, yeah, things like that extended stay in Lake Town, which was just stopped dead for most of it, and anything involving Alfred, who is the most pointless character in the history of anything ever.
Oh, he was the worst.
And in the theatrical cut, you don't even see him get killed. You don't even actually see him get his comeuppance, which is one of the nice things about the extended cut. You do see him finally get murdered, which is great. But I know Peter Jackson wanted it to be 2 films and nearly drove himself into a nervous breakdown along with all of his crew trying to expand this thing.
I've seen the behind-the-scenes material. Trust me, there was no nearly about it. It happened.
I know he was in hospital for a while. He had a gastric ulcer, I think.
Yeah, and that was before the film even started production.
Yeah, you know something has gone wrong when your director has been driven into hospital.
Yeah, and it breaks my heart because if you watch the director's commentary, and you listen to Peter Jackson's commentary in the 3rd film, you can practically hear him just loading bullets in the gun and just thinking, "Oh God, get me out of here! I'll shoot my way out."
He didn't want to do it in the first place.
This is totally an aside, but the Lord of the Rings was done by Peter and Fran and Philippa. And The Hobbit, I believe, was just Peter and Fran. Or Peter and Philippa, but it was missing one of the ladies. And I kind of thought, well, maybe that's what happened. It wasn't just, the corporate greed, and it wasn't just a studio overreach. Maybe there was that one person who's supposed to be there going, "No, Peter, that's a bad idea," and they didn't have that person.
It's possible. I think there was an awful lot of things went wrong there. We're kind of getting a little off topic, though.
Yeah,
we have a lot of thoughts and feelings.
Yeah, and another example of this, though, is, and it's debatable how much of an example it is Game of Thrones compared to the books. Because there's a lot of things that are changed and extended from the books, but the books are so huge.
Yeah, I remember, and that was actually something that I remember when the show was first announced way back in the day when dinosaurs roamed the earth. Yes, children, there was at one point in time before Game of Thrones when they first announced the series, and I was like, wow, okay, well that's something that you're going to get a good 9 or 10 years out of, because like you could get 3 seasons out of just one book. I mean, I got to look. I actually have somewhere buried a hardcover edition of the very first book, and if you could do grievous bodily harm to somebody with this thing if you threw it at them. It's that large. But apparently, the not having seen the series myself, apparently it overtook the books pretty quickly.
Relatively quickly, yeah. It's because a lot of stuff which is living in people's heads. A lot of things like what happens with Arya and a lot of stuff with the Night's Watch and Jon Snow on the Wall is kind of living inside somebody's head for an extended period of time, and it's very difficult to transfer that to film. Another example of this is I haven't read The Hunger Games, but I did see the first film, and one of the problems I had with it is I do not know what's going on inside this character's head, and that's a key part of the book, is knowing what's going on inside her head. And anytime you get that disconnect and it's a key part of the plot, but you can't tell what's going on inside your head and their head, you're going to cause problems. So they just cut those parts out and papered over with exposition and other characters instead.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of voiceover narration in films, but I have to admit, The Hunger Games is a film trilogy that really been very well served by one. But, Kat, you were about to say something about Game of Thrones.
I think. Have completely lost it if I was going to say something.
Okay. But now, I do know that there have been many, many, many times in anime where a manga has been adapted and they've stretched things out in the anime because they've caught up with the source material or whatever various reasons. So, Kat, why don't you list off a few notorious examples of that?
God, I mean, like, it'd be easier to name the ones that don't do it. It's certainly the big shonen series, like the One Piece and Naruto and Bleach. Everybody does it. In this case, we call it filler. And it's just fluff that's put in between seasons to pad it out. This isn't necessarily done for... It's not always done maliciously. It's done to fill in a time slot, because the TV seasons are Anime, a lot of it, most of it, airs on television at certain times, certain days of the week. We don't have that as much here, and we certainly don't create it. You know, we don't create anime with the intention of putting it on television. We just dub it over here. So anime gets made to, you know, if it gets licensed, it gets licensed for, you know, like a Friday night at 6 p.m. time slot. So, and then it'll get put onto a schedule, and that schedule will be X number of weeks. So they have to come up with X number of weeks worth of material and stretch that across a season. So, and then you get like long-running shows like, say, Naruto, and once they've caught up with the source material, well, they still have that time slot. They're not going to take a season off in order for... and lose their, you know, they don't want to risk losing their time slot by taking a season off or anything like that. So they have to keep churning out material regardless of what the source material has. And when you think about it, it's way harder than you might think to let the source material catch up, because you have to wait for, you know, once you run out of material, there's a big chunk of time before the mangaka or whoever produces more material, and then there's the time that has to be spent animating that and producing it. So it's like this double long process. This is why it took Attack on Titan like 3 years in between seasons, because they had to wait for a huge chunk of time for there to be enough material for another season, and then they had to go into production. And any delay in that production just meant way, way longer before the next season. But Attack on Titan didn't do any filler in between. And it was such a hot commodity that it didn't need to. It didn't need to, and honestly, this is a show that would have been very poorly served by any kind of filler or fluff in between seasons. It's just not something that can exist in that kind of show. But if you've got a really long-running shonen series where you can just make some shit up and pad it out for a little while, just throw in a tournament or something, then that's what studios will do. And it preserves their time slot. They can keep making money, that sort of thing. They can keep making merchandise. So a lot of big name stuff gets done that way. I think just due to the shift in the industry and how the whole industry has changed, I think we're seeing less of it. We used to have every show, if it aired on television, there was going to be filler. Every shonen series, every shoujo series, everything had filler. If you go back to the good old 90s anime that we idolized, it all had shit filler inside of it. There was just garbage attached to like every show. And nowadays, because of streaming and not everything has to air on television, a lot of shows are being remade. Like a lot of 90s series are getting remade, condensed with no filler. And it's like this revolution. Like now the studios are coming around to the concept of less filler is better. And I think that it's primarily because of streaming. Because if you're doing it online, you don't have to be beholden to a schedule, a TV schedule of any kind. You can just put it out there and let the fans enjoy it without a bunch of garbage.
Yes, and anime series should tread with care when they do employ filler, because I can think of an instance where a narrative was decompressed and made into filler, where it murdered the fan base pretty much overnight. And that was the infamous Endless 8 for Haruhi Suzumiya.
Oh my god!
I know, let's do the exact same episode over and over and over again.
That was murder. I haven't watched it because I knew what it was, and I was like, I'm not doing that.
Well, I have watched it, and I've also read the original manga. The Endless 8 in the manga was like 2 chapters tops. You had the first part of it where it was just a regular day, and then the second part was when Kyon kind of noticed, okay, something's a little funky here. But in the anime, in the second season, they took it literally. They literally did 8 straight episodes of just the same summer day over and over and over again. And it wiped out fan interest in Haruhi Suzumiya as a property, you know, which...
It was huge, and then it was just gone.
And it was because of, in large part, because of the Endless 8. Like, to put this in context, okay, you remember how big One Punch Man was a couple years ago?
Yeah.
Haruhi Suzumiya was that in like 2007, 2008. It was that huge. Then after Endless 8, gone. Just not there anymore. And what little fan base is left has been clamoring for more material for years, but just because the Endless 8 bombed so horribly, I don't think any studios are willing to pick it back up again. I don't know, Kat, maybe you can shed some light on that.
No, there's tons of spin-offs of Haruhi. There's just not like another season. There's like a Yuki-centric stuff. There's plenty, because it's one of those things that's going to stick around forever, because you can make girly figurines of it and sell those to fans. So there's spin-offs, but there isn't like a season 3 or anything like that. I think there's still plenty of material, but fans aren't clamoring for it anymore. And what's funny about the Endless 8 is that everything that was done with the Endless 8 was done very intentionally, very deliberately. Each episode had a slight little change that was supposed to be meaningful, but people just fucking hated it because nobody wants to watch the same thing over and over. I can think of one big shonen anime that did filler right. And I love this show to death. It's Katekyo Hitman Reborn. Reborn was a show that it was a big shonen series. It had a lot going for it. It never got super popular here, and when it was at its peak, it was like, I don't know, like 6 years ago or something, but it caught up with its material, and the studio went to the mangaka and was like, tell us what to do. And so she was like, here's a story, here's a bunch of character designs, about a bunch of stuff that the fans want to know about, but we haven't been able to put into, it hasn't made it into the manga yet. So figure out a way to do this. And so they did this thing that the mangaka said, and all the fans got to see all of these really cool characters that they've been wanting to see forever. And the studio got a filler season, and it was genius. It's just that easy. You just go to the mangaka and say, tell us what the fans want. And the mangaka like just dumped a bunch of information on them, and they did it. And you could tell it was filler, but it was important filler. It was relevant.
It's sort of, from what I understand, it's sort of what they've done with Game of Thrones. They went to George R. R. Martin and they said, what is the end point here? And the general roadmap. Because if you're a comic book artist or a manga artist and you or writer, and you have somebody, TV producers or whatever, coming to you and saying, right, where are you going to start on your next thing, and we will get you there. Next chapter is you start in a wood. Right, great, we'll get you to the wood. And at that point, you can just kind of say, here's your filler season. We go wandering through the woods for a while. There you are. Do you see what I mean? Am I making sense?
It's pretty much just what Game of Thrones did, where Game of Thrones was running out of material. It was running out of material for individual characters, keep them relevant to the story. And it was just like, tell us what's to come. And they're doing their best. And we don't know for sure how much of it is going to happen in the books. There are some things that we do know, like this is what George has said is going to happen in the books, and maybe some other things that are just general outlines, and maybe it won't happen quite that way. But like we are, like George has given Game of Thrones a direction to go and has told them kind of, what to do, and then they take their liberties and we get what we get.
Yeah. And I don't mind that. I don't mind. It doesn't have to be a carbon copy of the book, because a book and a TV show are very different things that approach telling a story in a different way. So, but the fact that they've got that roadmap and they said, right, okay, we need to get from here to over there. Let's write that. And if it's different from the book, fine, but at least we've got to the same location.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff where something like Game of Thrones and very much Lord of the Rings did it carbon copy from the book. If you didn't flesh some things out or change some things, it just wouldn't work. Because of what we talked about with Lord of the Rings. A good chunk of Lord of the Rings is just describing landscapes while people hike. Like, that's not interesting. What's interesting is the character dynamics and the fighting and all the good stuff. It's the same thing with Game of Thrones. why they have to cut so many characters and combine characters and cut out subplots, because you just can't fit what Game of Thrones has in the books. You can't fit it all into one TV show and have people be able to follow it. It's just a different medium. And so every different medium has its reason for getting fleshed out or getting padded or whatever when they bring it to television.
I think one of the problems that extended or decompressed narratives tend to have is if they don't have an end point.
Exactly.
If they have a start and a middle, but they're just endlessly dragging out in the middle because they can't end. Spider-Man: The Clone Saga is a class example of this.
I think I hear Brian screaming off in the distance.
Oh yeah, I hear that too, which is impressive.
Man's got a set of lungs on him.
I know, right?
The Clone Saga. I'm sure that somebody in the comments is going to come in and correct me, but as I recall, the story behind the Clone Saga was that it was originally supposed to be just a one-off, like 1 year thing, where they brought up the possibility that Peter Parker was a clone and Ben Reilly was the real Spider-Man. But they got such a vocal response to it that they're like, oh, well, let's see how long we can ride this money train out. And then we got Ben Reilly as Spider-Man for another 3 years. And the problem with the way it was handled was not just in terms of the length, but in how, I guess, disrespectful it was to the character of Peter Parker and to all that, had been done with him previously. It kind of felt like it was kind of like a precursor of what we have now. It's like, oh, this character that you love is gone now, and now here's this new character that you have to follow, and you have to take it. In 2000, here's how poorly it was responded to. In 2005, I was working for a comic book store in Glen Burnie. I think I've mentioned this on the show before. Twilight Zone Comics. Shout out, great place. If you go in and bumpers there, tell him Billy Smith says hi. He might give you a discount. I don't know if he will, but, just try it. Tell him I said hello. And I was there when Ultimate Spider-Man did its version of the Clone Saga, which, for the record, lasted all of 6 issues. When that first issue came out, I had a guy come in, and he was picking up his subscription box, and he was flipping through it. And when he saw Clone Saga written across that first issue of Ultimate Spider-Man, he started screaming. Because he had been around for the original run of the Clone Saga, and he had an idea of what was coming. Which, in fairness to Ultimate Spider-Man, was handled much better than it was in Amazing Spider-Man, but that's the impression that it left on people, was just this 3-year-long period of basically crap that had nothing to do with the characters that people had grown to love. So I'm sure that someone in the comments, or maybe Brian himself, will chime in with more on the Clone Saga and my butchered retelling. So, but I mean, that's the damage that decompressing your narrative and putting in too much filler can do. Is it can distract from what people are really here for. And eventually, if you do it for long enough, people are going to just lose interest and be like, all right, come back if you ever get back on the train, and then they never come back.
Yeah, see also the X-Files.
Oh, God, yeah.
See, part of the problem with the X-Files was the X-Files reached a point where it was supposed to end 3 times in that show. But Fox kept ordering new episodes.
Yep.
But anyway, that's a whole nother that's a discussion for a whole nother table. So you don't really. I'm trying to think of a gaming example where something dragged on for longer than it should have, and I can't think of any real. Okay, actually, I can think of a moment where a narrative should have ended sooner than it did, and that was Far Cry 3. Much was made in the marketing of Far Cry 3's first villain, Vaz, who was a fucking psychopath, and he was a very interesting villain. He was a character that, we wanted to get to know more about, but we were also kind of terrified because he was fucking mental. And he was just a very charismatic villain. He stole every scene that he was in, and it was such a satisfying, moment in the game where you finally got to kill his ass. And then you get told, oh, well, now you've got to go over to this another 3 or 4 hours and go after somebody that you've never heard of, that you've never been introduced to, and that you have no emotional connection to whatsoever. And I feel like that Far Cry 3 would have been better served by just ending the game with that encounter with Vaz. But no, they had to. Ubisoft had to have that large, expansive world. They had to have that extra island. And I've actually never finished Far Cry 3 because after Voss dies, I just can't bring myself to care about anything else that goes on. Because he was the most interesting part of that game. So yeah,
I do. There is another video game example.
The floor is yours.
And I would like to preface this by saying I am a huge fan of this series. Kingdom Hearts.
Oh my god.
Oh. Alright, everybody put your helmets on. The fan base is about to explode.
I love Kingdom Hearts, and I love playing the games, and I think a lot of the concepts in the story are brilliant, and I really like them. The duality of the heart and the eternal battle between light and darkness, and as long as darkness exists, you'll need someone to fight it. Great, carry on, brilliant. And the idea that any heart can be overwhelmed by darkness, also great. The idea that there is a way back if you are strong enough willed, awesome. The whole scheme with Xehanort that just keeps going on and on and on, and getting more and more and more convoluted and complicated. What I was saying earlier about the fact that when you do not have an end point, as far as I can tell, the writer of Kingdom Hearts did not have a clear end point for this series up until very recently. And even then, he said that that's only the end of the Dark something saga?
Dark Keyblade?
Something like that, I forget. So it's only the end of this saga. Right. But then there's Kingdom Hearts 1, Kingdom Hearts, the card game 1.
Chain of Memories.
Kingdom Hearts 2. Okay, you've got it's slightly complicated, but I can follow it. And then you start getting into Recoded and Birth by Sleep, and adding more and more layers of complexity and backstory and weirdness.
And Roxas is in every single one of them.
With about 14 different names.
I hate that character so much.
I quite like Ventus, which is really odd. Because I don't really like Roxas very much, but I like Ventus, and they're kind of the same person. I'm very confused.
Now, here's a question that I want to put forward, okay? Kingdom Hearts 2, I think we can all agree, ended very epically. Like, that was...
Kingdom Hearts 2 is one of my favorite games ever.
Yeah, that was truly a feast for the eyes and the heart that, it will go down as one of the greatest game narratives ever made. But do you think maybe the reason why they've done so many of these niggly little fillers and spin-offs is because they don't know how to follow up on that? I
do have to wonder about that sometimes. I mean, what has been shown so far as Kingdom Hearts 3 looks great. But there's always that doubt. Oh, sorry, go on, Kat.
I think, and this is one of the only video games I know anything about, watch her play all of the Kingdom Hearts games so that I could be interested in the story, so she'd have somebody to talk about them with. Kingdom Hearts is so caught up in its own mythology that it has lost its ability to tell a story. Like, they don't know, I think they have a direction of where they're going, but they keep having to supplement the story with more story and more mythology and the all the stuff with Aqua and everything, and getting into these Keyblade wars, and you're just playing these games going, okay, yeah, but then what? And I really feel like they just got so caught up in the world building and expanding everything that they really lost track of the actual story.
They forgot to add the "and why should I care" thing.
Yes, exactly.
You know what the greatest distillation of what I think Kingdom Hearts' problem with mythology is? You ever hear of a webcomic called VG Cats?
Yes.
Yes, I've heard of it.
Okay. There's a strip that the creator put up a few weeks ago, and it opens with in the Square Enix offices, and there's some of the writers sitting at the table, and a couple of the executives up at the front of the whiteboard. It's like, okay, congratulations, you guys are new writers for Kingdom Hearts 3. Before you can get started, let's bring you up to speed on the story so far and the mythology that you have to work with. And the next two panels are just like this torrent of information assaulting the writers and melting their faces. And the last panel is like, yeah, these writers' heads have exploded too. All right, bring in the next batch.
It's that meme of the guy with stuff on the corkboard trying to draw lines between things. And that doesn't make for a cohesive video game universe. It's really, really hard to follow. And it's a shame because it's really, really interesting. And this is one thing where I'm just like, yeah, when they make an anime of it, I will figure out which one's the real Xehanort. But until then...
There is a thing in Kingdom Hearts 3D, and I won't spoil it, but in Dream Drop Distance, there is a thing where it's like they're all in that kind of white throne room, and there's a revelation in there where you're like, I think I get it now. And it starts making more sense. You're like, that's what he's doing. That is messed up. But I think I now kind of understand more than I did.
Which isn't saying much, because I watched all these games, I've read up on all the characters, I still don't understand anything.
And to bring things kind of full circle and wrap things up, I want to kind of bring up Tolkien again in this, because he kind of did something similar with the Lord of the Rings as a book. He realized that there was stuff that was, but he kind of took a different tack. He realized that there was stuff that was important to the story that you would need to understand in order to get the full impact of what was going on. But he was also canny enough to know that if he put that stuff in the actual story, it would grind the narrative to a screeching halt. So, like, people who know Lord of the Rings only from the movies, the whole subplot with Aragorn and Arwen, which is central to Aragorn's character and his motivations in the story, that's not in the actual narrative of the novels. That's all told in the appendices.
Yeah.
Because Tolkien knew that if he put all that stuff in the books, everything would just grind to a screeching fucking halt. Whereas with Kingdom Hearts, I'm really scared to death that I'm going to go into Kingdom Hearts 3 and not know what the fuck is going on, because I haven't played any of these stupid little side games, because I am one of those people who's like, no, I'm going to boycott this series until I get Kingdom Hearts 3. And also because I just really, really...
so confused.
And
because I really, really fucking hate Roxas. And I want
I love Roxas.
Get away from Roxas. If Roxas shows up in Kingdom Hearts 3, I will decapitate Nomura with his own zipper. I swear to God I will.
Considering
beat him to death with a really big shoe.
Yeah, considering that he and Sora are kind of the same person.
Yeah.
And so are several other people.
Like, okay, I'll forgive Kingdom Hearts 2. Okay, alright. Roxas and Sora's nobody. Easy enough to follow. Now of the spin-offs, okay, apparently Roxas is actually his own separate person from Sora, and now I don't care.
Roxas and Ventus are not the same person. Sort of.
Oh, so he was just getting lazy with the character designs. Okay, I see.
There is a reason.
Even worse.
There is a
no, it's all very
between,
deliberate.
Yeah, there's a connection between Sora and Ventus, but it's not that they're the same person. It's all very confusing.
Well, you can show me the flowchart after the show. But anyway, it's time to start wrapping things up, because we're close to our end time. So let's kind of just sum up our thoughts on decompressed narratives and when they work and when they don't work. So, Skyblaze, let's start with you.
I think a decompressed narrative can work, provided that you do have a beginning, a middle, and an end. You can stretch those 3 sections out if you want to, but make sure that you have them. Just don't try and make like the beginning or the middle last for forever.
Okay. Kat, what about you?
I would say that if you are going to stretch something out, either for a TV show or whatever, just make... it works best when the original content creator is being consulted, when it's their ideas that are being put forward to make a more cohesive story. The less studios are involved with creating the padding the better it's going to be, because the studios are going to create padding that they think is going to bump the ratings, like, say, all the TNA that exists in Game of Thrones, the TV show, that really has nothing to do with the story. It's just little titillation. So the more valuable content that you can bring to it, the better. Filler, it sucks. It really sucks. It can be done well, but it usually isn't, at least in the mediums that I watch. It's just fluff, and it has no place in a plot-driven series. So I like when it's done well, but it almost never is.
Okay. Well, I can't really say anything to add to that, so I think we're just going to go ahead and wrap it up here. So that's all the time that we have for Third Power this week. Thank you so much for tuning in. Tune in next week when we will be discussing Avengers Infinity War, probably the most anticipated episode of this year. We are just hotly anticipating the new Avengers movie, and we've already got our bets placed as to who's going to die and when. So, yeah, come back next week. That's going to be a really big episode. So, yeah, we will see you guys next week. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Dr. Gonzo.
I'm the cat.
I'm Skyblaze.
All right, we will see you guys next week. Taka, play us out.